Hi, my name's Elena. I spent years helping my sister build her dream career. I paid for her certifications. I covered her rent while she interned abroad, and I even wrote the reference letters that got her foot in the door. But when I discovered she had deliberately canceled my honeymoon reservations 3 days before my wedding because she thought I was overshadowing her, I smiled, logged into my email, and canceled all 5 of her pending visa applications. Betrayal has consequences, and some lessons cost more than just money. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I remember staring at my laptop screen that Thursday afternoon, my wedding dress hanging on the closet door just a few feet away. The cursor blinked accusingly as I refreshed the hotel booking page for the 5th time. The message remained unchanged, no reservation found. My heart pounded against my ribs as I fumbled for my phone, scrolling through my emails for confirmation numbers that suddenly seemed to have vanished into digital air. The resort in Santorini, the one Thomas and I had saved for over 18 months to afford, the one with the private infinity pool, overlooking the caldera that would be the backdrop to our first week as husband and wife, had no record of our booking. 3 days before our wedding, 3 days before we were supposed to board a plane to Greece, I called the resort again, my voice steadier than I expected as I spelled my name for the receptionist. "I'm sorry, Ms. Harlow, but your reservation was canceled 2 weeks ago. The cancellation came from your registered email address." "That's impossible," I said, the room suddenly too warm. "I never canceled anything." "I can pull up the cancellation record," she offered. A brief pause. Keyboard clicks in the background. "Yes, it was processed on April 12th at 2:17 p.m. The system shows full refund was processed to the original payment method." April 12th. I was in final dress fittings all afternoon. I never touched my computer. I thanked her with automatic politeness and ended the call, my hands trembling as I checked my bank statements. The refund was there, $4,850 returned to my account with the simple notation, "Santorini Mare Resort cancellation." My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Just checked our Rome hotel. That reservation's gone too. What's happening?" The panic rose like bile in my throat. Not just Santorini, but Rome too? Our carefully planned 2-week honeymoon, the post-wedding dream we'd mapped out night after night, comparing hotels and reading reviews until our eyes burned. It was vanishing piece by piece. I tried to think logically through the haze of anxiety. Who could have done this? Who had access to my email? The answer formed like ice in my stomach before I'd even finished the thought. Margot, my sister. The only person I'd shared my travel account passwords with when she offered to help research options last year. The same sister who'd grown increasingly cold as my wedding approached. The same sister who had made subtle comments about how my perfect wedding was stealing attention from her career achievements. The sister who was supposed to be my maid of honor, but who had begun finding reasons to miss pre-wedding events. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then pulled up her contact. No, I wouldn't call. Not yet. First, I needed to be sure. I opened my laptop and navigated to my email, scrolling through weeks of correspondence until I found it. A confirmation email from the resort dated 3 months ago. I clicked on it, scanning for details, then checked the activity log that Google provides. Last opened, April 12th, 2:05 p.m. From IP address I didn't recognize. With shaking fingers, I pulled up the location data linked to my account. The IP address was registered to a location in downtown Portland, exactly where Margot's office was located. My chest tightened. I scrolled through my emails, searching for all travel-related messages. One by one, I found them, all accessed on April 12th between 2 o'clock and 3:30 p.m., all from that same IP address. Outside, Spring rain tapped gently against my apartment window, the soft rhythm at odds with the storm building inside me. I'd spent years supporting Margot's dreams, pushing my own aside to help her succeed. When our parents couldn't afford to send both of us to college at once, I deferred my acceptance so she could go first. When she needed money for her master's program application fees, I picked up weekend shifts at the cafe. When she wanted to apply for positions abroad, I stayed up late helping her polish her resume and cover letters. I had never asked for thanks. That's what sisters do, I thought. We lift each other up. The betrayal burned not because she'd taken something from me, but because she'd done it deliberately, methodically, knowing exactly what this honeymoon meant to Thomas and me. My phone buzzed again. Thomas, should we look for alternatives? Not many options left this close to departure. I didn't respond immediately. My mind was already racing ahead to what this meant, the lost deposits for activities we'd booked, the scramble to find new accommodations during peak season, the disappointment that would taint our wedding day knowing our honeymoon plans had collapsed. My wedding was in 3 days. 3 days that should be filled with joy and anticipation, not panic and betrayal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to Teal. U.S. Now back to the story. I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. That's when I remembered something else. Something important. Margot had asked me just last week to review her latest visa applications. She was applying for work permits in 5 different countries, ambitious plans to expand her consulting career internationally. She'd given me her login information so I could check the documents she'd uploaded, make sure everything was in order. "You've always been better at this stuff than me," she'd said, the compliment sliding easily from her lips. "I trust your judgment." My fingers hovered over my keyboard. The rain intensified outside, a sudden downpour that matched the darkness, spreading through my thoughts. I thought about calling her, confronting her. I imagined her denial, then perhaps a reluctant confession followed by some excuse about how my wedding was triggering for her, how she felt overshadowed, how she'd acted impulsively. I'd heard versions of those excuses before, always accepted. Them, always forgave, not this time. I navigated to the international visa application portal she'd shared with me and logged in using her credentials. There they were, 5 pending applications for work visas in Germany, Singapore, Canada, Australia, and the UK, months of preparation, professional recommendations, documentation of her expertise. Her entire future plan laid out in digital form. All of them listed, in process, awaiting final submission. She hadn't fully submitted them yet. She was waiting for my review, my approval. My finger traced the edge of my trackpad as I considered what to do. The old Elena would never have dreamed of retaliating. The old Elena would have swallowed her hurt, scrambled to fix the honeymoon problem, probably even made excuses for Margot's behavior. But the woman sitting in that apartment, 3 days from her wedding, with her honeymoon in ruins, wasn't the old Elena anymore. I clicked on the first application, Germany. My eyes scanned the page until I found what I was looking for. Withdraw. Application. A confirmation dialog appeared. Are you sure you want to withdraw this application? This action cannot be undone. I hesitated for just a moment, remembering all the times I'd sacrificed for Margot. All the times I'd put her needs first. All the times I'd convinced myself that her success was partly mine because I'd helped her achieve it. Then I remembered the calculated precision with which she'd destroyed something precious to me. I clicked confirm. One by one, I withdrew. Each application, Germany, Singapore, Canada, Australia, the UK. With each confirmation, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. This wasn't about revenge, it was about consequences. For once, Margot would experience the sharp sting of having her plans dismantled by someone she trusted. When I finished, I logged out, closed my laptop, and finally replied to Thomas, not what we dreamed of, but it would be ours. As I was booking the final hotel, my phone rang. Margot again. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, another call. Then another. Then a string of increasingly panicked texts. Elena, are you okay? Please call me ASAP. Something's wrong with my applications. They're all showing as withdrawn. Did you see anything wrong when you checked them? I finished the booking, confirmed the reservation, and only then picked up my phone to read her messages. Each one more desperate than the last. She hadn't connected the dots yet. Hadn't realized. This was my response to what she'd done. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely, but another part, the part that had been silenced for too long, wanted her to know. Wanted her to understand that actions have consequences, that my forgiveness wasn't infinite, that the sister she'd taken for granted had finally found her limit. I typed a single response. Weird. Same thing happened to my honeymoon reservations. Then I silenced my phone, put it in a drawer, and went to pick up my wedding dress from its final alterations. The boutique was quiet that afternoon. Just me and the elderly seamstress who had spent hours perfecting every stitch of the gown I would wear in 3 days. As she helped me try it on one last time, making minute adjustments to the bustle, I caught sight of myself in the 3-way mirror. I looked different somehow. My posture straighter, my eyes clearer. The woman in the mirror wasn't just a bride-to-be. She was someone who had finally drawn a boundary, who had said enough after years of saying, "It's fine." "You look beautiful," the seamstress said, stepping back to admire her work. Like a woman who knows her own mind. I smiled at her reflection in the mirror. "Thank you. I think I finally do." When I returned home, I found 3 missed calls from my mother and a voicemail that made my stomach clench. "Elena, what's going on?" Margot just called me sobbing. About her visa applications being withdrawn. "She said you were the only one with access. This doesn't sound like you, honey. Call me back." Of course Margot had called our mother. Of course she'd cast herself as the victim. The familiar pattern threatened to pull me back into our old dynamic. Margot creates a problem, I get blamed, I apologize to keep the peace. Not today. I called my mother back, my voice steadier than I expected. "Mom, did Margot mention that she canceled all my honeymoon reservations? The ones Thomas and I saved for over a year to afford?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "What?" "No, she didn't say anything about that." "Ask her about it," I said simply. "And when you've heard her explanation, call me back if you still think I should apologize." I ended the call before she could respond, surprising myself with my own directness. For years, I'd been the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over to keep everyone happy. It felt strange to stand my ground, uncomfortable but necessary, like stretching a muscle that had atrophied from disuse. The rain had stopped by evening, leaving the air fresh and clean. Thomas came over with takeout and a bottle of wine, and we spread our new travel plans across the coffee table. Lisbon instead of Santorini, Porto instead of Rome. Different cities, different memories to make, but the same excitement at the thought of exploring them together. "I like this better anyway," he said, tracing the coastal route we'd take. "Less touristy, more authentic." I hadn't told him yet about Margot's role in all this, or about my retaliation. I would, eventually, but not now. Not when we were 3 days from promising each other forever. Not when we were rebuilding our honeymoon plans from scratch. Some conversations could wait. My phone buzzed again. Margot for the 20th time that day. I silenced it without looking. "Everything okay?" Thomas asked, noticing my expression. I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. "It will be," I said, and for the first time since discovering the canceled reservations, I truly believed it. The day before my wedding dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself was acknowledging the shift in my life. My bridesmaids arrived early, chattering excitedly as they hung garment bags and arranged makeup kits in my apartment. Margot's dress hung apart from the others. She was still my maid of honor, at least in title. I hadn't uninvited her from the wedding. That would have required explanations I wasn't ready to give to the rest of my family and friends. But I knew things between us had changed irrevocably. Around noon, as my best friend was arranging flowers for our hair, my mother called again. I stepped onto the balcony to answer, bracing myself for the conversation. "I talked to Margot," she said without preamble. She admitted what she did. I waited, saying nothing, giving her space to continue. She said she was feeling overlooked, that your wedding was getting all the attention when she had just received recognition for her work. She said she didn't think it through, that she was going to tell you after the wedding so you could rebook everything. The justification was so perfectly Margot, the impulsive action, the self-centered reasoning, the plan to fix it that conveniently came after she'd already caused the damage. "And what did you say to her?" I asked, my voice neutral. My mother sighed heavily. "I told her she was wrong. That what she did was inexcusable. The validation was unexpected, a warm current against the cold tide of betrayal I'd been swimming in." "Thank you," I said softly. "But Alina," my mother continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "did you really cancel all her visa applications? Those were important to her career." And there it was, the subtle shift back to Margot's needs, Margot's feelings, Margot's future. As if my actions existed in a vacuum, disconnected from what had provoked them. "Yes," I said simply. "I did. Couldn't you have found another way to address this? This seemed so vindictive." I leaned against the balcony railing, watching a pair of sparrows hop along the edge of a nearby rooftop. "Mom, for my entire life, I've put Margot first. I've supported her, defended her, made excuses for her. I've never asked for recognition or thanks, but this time, she deliberately tried to ruin one of the most important moments of my life. So yes, I made sure she understood exactly how that feels." "She's devastated," my mother said, as if that should move me. "I was devastated too," I replied. "The difference is, I didn't call you crying about it. I fixed it myself, just like I always do." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken realizations. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice softer. "You're right. I've always expected more from you because you've always given more. That wasn't fair. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the years of imbalance between my sister and me, but it was something. A crack in the family narrative that had cast me as the strong one, the capable one, the one who didn't need protection or concern because I could handle anything." "Margot wants to come early tomorrow, before the ceremony," my mother said. "To talk to you." I told her I'd ask if that's okay. I thought about it, weighing the potential for drama against the possibility of resolution. Not forgiveness, I wasn't ready for that, but perhaps a reckoning that was long overdue. "She can come," I said finally. "But tell her to be prepared for honesty." After hanging up, I rejoined my bridesmaids, sliding back into the joyful bubble of pre-wedding festivities. We drank champagne, tried different hairstyles, laughed at old stories. For those few hours, I set aside thoughts of Margot and lost honeymoons and withdrawn visa applications. Tomorrow I would marry the man I loved, and nothing, not even my sister's betrayal, would dim that joy. That evening, after everyone had left and I was alone in my apartment for the last time as a single woman, I opened my laptop and checked my email. There, buried among well wishes and last-minute wedding details, was a message from Margot. Subject: "I'm sorry the email was long, full of explanations and justifications woven through apologies." She wrote about feeling overshadowed, about the timing of my wedding coinciding with her professional recognition, about acting impulsively and immediately regretting it. She wrote about planning to tell me after the wedding, about having set aside money to help us rebook everything at better resorts. It was, in many ways, exactly what I'd expected, a carefully crafted narrative that acknowledged wrongdoing while subtly minimizing responsibility. The final paragraph, though, surprised me. I understand why you canceled my visa applications. I deserved it. For years, you've supported my dreams while I've taken yours for granted. I never thought about what your wedding and honeymoon meant to you because I was too focused on myself. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I know I haven't earned it. But I am asking for a chance to be better, to finally be the sister you've always been to me. I read the email twice, searching for the manipulation hidden between the lines. But for once, Margot's words seemed genuine, or at least as genuine as she was capable of being. I didn't respond. Tomorrow would be time enough for words between us. Tonight was for looking forward, not back. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and slipped into bed. Through the window, stars punctuated the clear night sky, each one a pinpoint of possibility. Tomorrow, I would become Elena Harlow Carter. Tomorrow, I would begin a new chapter with Thomas by my side. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would also be the beginning of a new relationship with my sister. One built on honesty and boundaries rather than sacrifice and resentment. The morning of my wedding, I woke before dawn. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, watching the first gray light filter through my curtains. Today I would become Elena Harlow Carter. Today I would promise forever to Thomas. And today, I would finally face my sister. I made coffee in the quiet apartment, savoring these last peaceful moments alone. My wedding dress hung on the closet door, catching the early light like a promise. Despite everything, the ruined honeymoon plans, Margot's betrayal, the frantic rescheduling, I felt strangely calm. Perhaps it was because I had finally stood my ground after years of yielding. Perhaps it was because, for once, I had demanded consequences instead of offering forgiveness. The doorbell rang at precisely 8 a.m. I knew who it was before I even checked the peephole. Margot always had perfect timing, even when she was about to face the music. I opened the door, and there she stood, my sister, my maid of honor, my lifelong antagonist dressed in casual elegance. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her makeup understated. She carried a small gift bag in one hand. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I stepped aside wordlessly, letting her enter. The apartment felt smaller with her in it, as if her presence consumed more oxygen than it should. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the gift bag. I took it, not out of eagerness but to move this conversation along. Inside was a jewelry box containing a pair of sapphire earrings, elegant, expensive, exactly my taste. "You're something blue," she explained. "I had them custom-made 3 months ago." I closed the box and set it on the coffee table. "Thank you. They're beautiful." An awkward silence stretched between us, charged with unspoken accusations and defenses. Finally, Margot spoke. "I'm sorry about the honeymoon," she said. "What I did was inexcusable." "Yes," I agreed simply. "It was." She shifted uncomfortably, unused to my directness. The old Elena would have rushed to ease the tension, to offer reassurance or acceptance, but I remained silent, waiting. "I've been seeing a therapist," she continued after a moment, "for a few months now. She says I have issues with comparative success, that I measure my worth against others, especially you." I raised an eyebrow. "And that justifies sabotaging my honeymoon?" "No," she said quickly. "Nothing justifies that. I'm just trying to explain why I keep doing these things. Especially to you." I moved to the kitchen, pouring a second cup of coffee, more to occupy my hands than anything else. I offered it to her, and she accepted with a grateful nod. "You canceled my visa applications," she said quietly. "I did. That was effective. I can't reapply for at least 6 months now. The recruitment cycles will have passed. I met her gaze steadily. I know. She blinked, perhaps surprised by my lack of apology. I deserved it, she admitted after a moment. I just never expected you to actually fight back. And there it was, the truth at the heart of our relationship. For years, Margot had pushed and taken and demanded, secure in the knowledge that I would never push back. I had been cast as the accommodating sister, the one who sacrificed without complaint, the one who could be counted on to forgive any transgression for the sake of family peace. That was your mistake, I said, my voice soft but firm. Assuming I would always be the bigger person, she nodded slowly. Mom said you're going to Portugal instead. Yes, it's not what we planned, but we're making it work. I have the money, she offered, reaching for her purse, to reimburse you for everything. Plus extra, to make up for the last-minute booking costs. I considered her offer. The money would help, certainly. But accepting it felt like giving her an easy out, a way to purchase absolution without addressing the deeper patterns between us. Keep your money, I said finally. But I want something else from you instead. She looked up wary. What? The truth. Complete honesty about why you did this, and everything else over the years. No therapist explanations, no excuses. Just the raw truth. Margot set down her coffee cup with a shaking hand. You really want that? Today of all days? Yes. Consider it your wedding gift to me. She took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into cold water. I've always been jealous of you, she began, the words coming out like they hurt. Not of what you have, but of who you are. You're effortlessly good. Kind without trying. Smart without showing off. I have to work at all of those things, and even then, I usually fail. I started to interrupt, but she held up a hand. You asked for honesty, so let me finish. When you got engaged to Thomas, I was happy for you, truly. But then I watched everyone fawn over your love story, your ring, your plans. Meanwhile, I had just been named project lead for an international initiative that could transform my career. And no one in our family seemed to care. She paused, looking down at her hands. The honeymoon. I don't even know how to explain it. I was sitting at my desk, going through emails, and I saw your travel confirmation. Something just snapped. I thought, why does Alina get the fairy tale romance and the dream honeymoon while I'm alone in this office? So I canceled it. And for about 10 minutes, it felt good, powerful. Then I realized what I'd done, but I couldn't figure out how to fix it without admitting what I'd done. The honesty was brutal, but also strangely refreshing. For once, Margot wasn't spinning a narrative to cast herself as misunderstood or justified. She was simply laying bare the ugly truth of her resentment. Why didn't you just talk to me? I asked, all these years, if you felt this way? She laughed bitterly. And say what? Hey sis, I'm pathologically jealous of your existence. Besides, you've always been my biggest champion. You deferred college for me. You helped me with applications. You proofread every cover letter. How do you tell someone who sacrifices everything? For you that sometimes you hate them for being so goddamn selfless. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had always viewed my support as love, but through her eyes, it looked different, like an impossible standard she could never match. A debt she could never repay. I never meant to make you feel inadequate, I said quietly. I know, that's what makes it worse. You weren't even trying. You were just being you. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of unspoken resentment and misunderstanding. Between us, what happens now? She finally asked. Am I still your maid of honor? Do you even want me at the wedding? I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to send her away, to have this one day untainted by our complicated relationship. But another part recognized that cutting her out completely would create a different kind of shadow over the day. Explanations to give, questions to deflect, family drama to manage. You're still my maid of honor, I said finally. But things are different now. I'm different. I won't go back to being the sister who absorbs every slight, who makes excuses for your behavior, who puts your needs above my own. She nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair, actually. And I want you to decline the Berlin position. I added, referring to the most prestigious of the international opportunities she'd been pursuing. Her head snapped up. What? Why? Because it should go to Naomi Peterson, the one whose research you took credit for last year. Margot's face drained of color. How did you know about that? Naomi is friends with Thomas's cousin. Small world. She never reported you because she was afraid of career repercussions. But we both know you built that proposal on her framework. For a moment, I thought Margot might deny it, might revert to her usual defenses and justifications. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. I'll withdraw my name from consideration. And I'll talk to the committee about Naomi's contributions. Good, I said simply. The morning light had strengthened, filling the apartment with gold. In a few hours, I would walk down the aisle toward Thomas. In a few hours, I would begin a new chapter as Alina Harlow Carter. But first, I needed to close this chapter with my sister. One more thing, I said, reaching for the jewelry box with the sapphire earrings. I'll wear these today. They're beautiful, and they're perfect for the occasion, but they're not an eraser. They don't wipe the slate clean. I know, Margot said quietly. I don't expect them to. She stood, smoothing her casual dress. I should go. The hairstylist will be here soon, and the makeup artist. I'll come back with the others. She hesitated at the door. Thank you for still letting me be part of your day. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, feeling lighter somehow. Not because all was forgiven, it wasn't, not by a long shot. But because for the first time in our relationship, we had been truly honest with each other. No masks. No polite fictions, no carefully maintained roles of selfless sister and grateful recipient. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. Bridesmaids arriving with champagne and excitement. Hair and makeup artists transforming us all. The photographer capturing candid moments of laughter and anticipation. Margot performed her maid of honor duties perfectly, helping me into my dress, arranging my veil, keeping track of the timeline. She was subdued but present, careful but not cold. As we prepared to leave for the church, my mother pulled me aside. You look radiant, she said, adjusting my necklace with trembling hands. Your father would have been so proud. I thought of my father, gone 5 years now. How he had always seen the dynamics between Margot and me with clear eyes, even when my mother had been blind to them. Thanks, Mom. I think he would have been proud of more than just how I looked today. She met my gaze, understanding dawning in her eyes. Yes, she said softly. He always said you had a spine of steel beneath all that kindness. I think he'd be proud to see you finally using it. The ceremony was everything I had dreamed it would be. The church filled with fragrant spring flowers, sunlight streaming through stained glass, music swelling as I walked down the aisle on my uncle's arm. Thomas's face when he saw me, a mixture of awe and love and certainty, made every difficult moment leading up to this day worthwhile. We exchanged our vows with steady voices, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss we shared felt like a beginning and a culmination all at once. At the reception, Margot gave her maid of honor speech. I had wondered what she would say, how she would navigate the complex emotions between us while fulfilling this traditional role. I've known Elena her entire life, she began, champagne glass raised. And in all that time, I've never met anyone with a bigger heart or a stronger sense of justice. She paused, meeting my gaze across the room. My sister taught me what true strength looks like. Not the kind that dominates or demands, but the kind that stands firm in its truth. The kind that holds others accountable because it believes they can be better. A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't the typical light-hearted wedding toast they had expected. "Thomas," she continued, turning to my new husband, "you're getting not just a wife today, but a partner who will always see the best in you while challenging you to live up to it." Elena doesn't just love with her heart. She loves with her integrity, her honesty, and her unwavering belief in doing what's right. She raised her glass higher. "To Elena and Thomas, may your marriage be built on the foundation of truth and respect that you both deserve." The guests applauded, unaware of the deeper meanings layered within her words. But Thomas looked at me questioningly, sensing something significant had transpired. I squeezed his hand, a silent promise to explain later. The rest of the reception unfolded in a whirl of dancing, cake-cutting, and joyful celebrations. As the evening wound down, Thomas and I prepared to leave for our wedding night at a luxury hotel before catching our flight to Lisbon the next morning. Margot approached us as we were saying our goodbyes. "I have something for you," she said, handing Thomas an envelope. "It's not a replacement for what I ruined. It's just a start." Thomas looked to me, and I nodded for him to open it. Inside was a voucher for a private sunset sailing cruise in Lisbon Harbor, complete with dinner and champagne. "I researched your new itinerary," Margot explained. "This was one of the highest-rated experiences. I thought it might be a good first night in Portugal." "Thank you," Thomas said, still clearly confused by the undercurrents he was sensing. "That's very thoughtful." I met my sister's gaze. "It is thoughtful and appreciated." She nodded, understanding the measured acceptance in my words. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of her effort to make amends. As we drove away from the reception, rice and flower petals still clinging to our clothes, Thomas finally asked the question he'd been holding back all day. "What happened between you and Margot?" "Something's different." I looked out at the passing streetlights, considering how to explain the seismic shift in a relationship that had defined much of my life. "I finally stopped playing the role I was assigned," I said simply, and I made her face the consequences of her actions. Briefly, I told him about the canceled honeymoon, the withdrawn visa applications, and the confrontation that morning. I expected shock, perhaps even disapproval. Thomas had always known me as the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts rather than creating them. Instead, he reached for my hand, bringing it to his lips. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary." His understanding washed over me like a wave, validating the new version of myself I was still learning to recognize. This man, who had promised to stand beside me through whatever life might bring, was already making good on that vow. That night, in our hotel suite with its view of the city lights, I stood by the window reflecting on the day. Not just the wedding, which had been beautiful despite, or perhaps because of, the honest reckoning that had preceded it, but the shift in my own sense of self. For so long, I had measured my worth by what I gave to others, especially to Margot. I had confused self-sacrifice with love, enabling with support. I had allowed myself to be used because it was easier than confronting the imbalance in our relationship. But true strength wasn't in endless giving. It was in standing firm in my own truth. It was in saying no when necessary, in holding others accountable, in demanding the respect I deserved. Thomas joined me at the window, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Harlow Carter?" I leaned back against him, savoring the warmth of his embrace and the new name that represented this fresh chapter in my life. "I'm thinking that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop carrying everyone else's burdens," I said. "And that I'm excited to start this new life with someone who doesn't see my kindness as a weakness to exploit." He turned me to face him, his expression serious. "Your kindness is one of the things I love most about you. But so is your courage, especially when it comes to standing up for yourself." Later that night, as Thomas slept beside me, I checked my phone one last time before our early flight. There was a text from Margot. I submitted my withdrawal from the Berlin position. And I contacted the committee about Naomi's contributions. You were right. She deserved recognition. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just letting you know I'm trying to be better. Have a beautiful honeymoon. You deserve every happiness. I didn't respond, not yet. Words were easy. Consistent actions were what mattered now. But I saved the message, a digital marker of what I hoped might be the beginning of a healthier relationship with my sister. In the morning, as we prepared to leave for the airport, I put on the sapphire earrings Margot had given me. Not as a symbol of forgiveness granted, but as a reminder of boundaries established and respect demanded. They caught the light as I turned my head, glinting with possibility, not just for my honeymoon or my marriage, but for a new way of engaging with the world from a place of strength rather than sacrifice. The taxi arrived to take us to the airport, and as we drove away from the hotel, I didn't look back. Portugal awaited, different from the Santorini dream we'd planned, but promising its own adventures and memories. More importantly, I was heading toward this future as a version of myself I was finally proud to be. A woman who could love deeply without losing herself, who could be kind without being taken advantage of, who understood that healthy relationships required boundaries as well as compassion. The morning sun broke through the clouds as we neared the airport, casting everything in a clear, golden light. I reached for Thomas's hand, intertwining our fingers. Ready for our adventure? He asked, smiling at me with such love that my heart swelled. More than ready, I replied, and I meant it in every possible way. Portugal embraced us with warm winds and azure skies as our plane touched down in Lisbon. Thomas squeezed my hand. As we stepped onto the tarmac, the Mediterranean sun kissing our faces like a welcome. This wasn't Santorini with its whitewashed buildings and infinity pools, but it held its own magic, terracotta rooftops cascading down to a glittering sea. Narrow cobblestone streets promising adventure around every corner. Different, but beautiful, Thomas whispered, echoing my thoughts as we collected our luggage and headed toward our waiting taxi. Our hotel perched on a hill overlooking the Tagus River, a restored 19th century mansion with wrought iron balconies and hand-painted azulejo tiles. The concierge greeted us with glasses of port wine and knowing smiles when we mentioned we were honeymooners. Our room wasn't the private villa with caldera views we'd originally booked, but it had its own charm, high ceilings, a clawfoot bathtub, and French doors opening to a small balcony where the city sprawled before us like a living postcard. We should get settled, then explore before dinner, Thomas suggested, unpacking his camera with the enthusiasm of a child unwrapping a gift. Photography was his passion, and new destinations always awakened his creative spirit. I agreed, but first stepped onto the balcony, breathing in the unfamiliar city scents, salt water mingled with baking bread, flowering jasmine, and the distant hum of traffic. My phone remained powered off in my purse, a deliberate choice. I'd made it the airport. For these 2 weeks there would be no family drama, no messages from Margot, no updates about visa applications or career consequences. Just Thomas and me, building the foundation of our marriage against this backdrop of discovery. We spent that first afternoon wandering the Alfama district, getting gloriously lost in the maze of narrow streets. Thomas photographed everything. Laundry fluttering from balconies, ancient doors with intricate knockers, an old woman shelling peas in her doorway, who smiled toothlessly when he asked permission to capture her image. I trailed my fingers along sun-warmed walls, savoring the feeling of being unmoored from my usual responsibilities and identities. Here, I wasn't Elena the reliable sister or Elena the peacemaker. I was simply Elena, newlywed, explorer, woman, coming into her own strength. That evening, we embarked on Margot's sailing cruise gift. The yacht was intimate, just us and 3 crew members. gliding across the harbor as the setting sun transformed the water into liquid gold. The captain pointed out landmarks, the imposing Snow-Horha Castle, the monument to the discoveries jutting proudly toward the sea, the 25 de Abril Bridge stretching across the narrowest part of the Tagus estuary. It reminds me of the Golden Gate, Thomas remarked, snapping photos as we passed beneath the bridge's red expanse. But with its own story, the captain corrected gently. Built during the dictatorship, renamed after the Carnation Revolution that brought democracy. Sometimes the most beautiful things emerge from difficult histories. His words resonated with me in unexpected ways. My own difficult history with Margot had led to this moment, not the honeymoon we'd planned, but perhaps the one we needed. A journey that wasn't about escapism or picture-perfect moments for social media, but about seeing things as they truly were and finding beauty in that reality. As we dined on freshly caught sea bass and local wines, Thomas raised his glass. To unexpected journeys, he said, his eyes holding mine. And to the strength to navigate them, I added, clinking my glass against his. Later, as we sailed back toward the twinkling lights of the city, I found myself reflecting on Margot's gift. It was thoughtful, yes, but also symbolic. She had given us an experience rather than attempting to replace what she'd taken. There was an acknowledgement in that choice, a recognition that some things, once broken, can't simply be replaced with identical substitutes. They must be honored with something different but equally meaningful. We spent the next 5 days exploring Lisbon and its surroundings, the majestic Pata Palace in Sintra, with its whimsical architecture and sweeping views, the pristine beaches of Cascais where we dipped our toes in the Atlantic, the historic Belém district where we devoured Portugal's famous custard tarts still warm from the oven. Each night, we returned to our hotel exhausted but fulfilled, falling into bed with salt on our skin and new memories etched into our hearts. On our 6th day, we took a train north to Porto, checking into a boutique hotel overlooking the Douro River. The city charmed us immediately with its medieval center, colorful buildings stacked along steep hills, and the famous port wine cellars. Across the river in Vila Nova de Gaia. Did you know, Thomas read from a guidebook as we strolled across the Dom Luis I Bridge, that port wine became popular because of a trade war with France? The British couldn't get French wine, so they started importing Portuguese wine and adding brandy to stabilize it for the journey home. So a disruption led to something wonderful, I mused, pausing to look out over the river where traditional Rabello boats bobbed gently against the current. Exactly like our honeymoon, Thomas said, pulling me close. Sometimes the best things come from having to change course. We spent that afternoon touring a historic port wine cellar, learning about the centuries-old tradition of winemaking in the Douro Valley. Our guide, Sophia, was a third-generation winemaker whose family had worked these cellars since before the Second World War. The secret to good port, she told us as we tasted a 20-year-old tawny, is understanding that time transforms everything. What starts as harsh and young becomes complex, balanced, beautiful, but only if you have patience. That evening, dining at a tiny family-owned restaurant tucked away on a side street, I finally turned on my phone. It had been a week since our wedding, and while I was enjoying the break from reality, I also felt secure enough in my newfound boundaries to face whatever might be waiting. There were the expected messages, congratulations from friends, updates from my bridesmaid Casey about returning the rented items, a text from my mother hoping we were having a wonderful time. And there were 3 messages from Margot, spaced several days apart. The first, sent the day after our wedding, the committee contacted Naomi about the Berlin position. She's being interviewed next week. The second, 3 days later, I've started looking for a therapist who specializes in family dynamics. I meant what I said about trying to be better. And the third, sent just yesterday, no pressure to respond. Just wanted you to know I'm respecting your boundaries and giving you space. Hope Portugal is magical. I showed the messages to Thomas, who read them thoughtfully before handing the phone back. What do you think? He asked, careful not to influence my response. I considered the question as I sipped my wine. I think she's trying. But I also think this is the honeymoon phase of her remorse, the part where change seems possible, and promises are easy to make. Thomas nodded. The real test will be when you're back home, when patterns have a chance to reassert themselves. Exactly, I agreed. For now, I'll acknowledge her messages but keep my distance. She needs to understand that trust is rebuilt over time, not purchased with grand gestures or immediate changes. I typed a simple response. Thank you for the updates. The sailing cruise was lovely. We're enjoying Portugal, different from what we planned, but beautiful in its own way. I'll be in touch when we return. Setting the phone aside, I returned my attention to Thomas and our intimate dinner, to the flickering candles and the guitarist playing fado music in the corner, to the life we were building together moment. My moment, Margot's journey toward becoming a better sister, was her responsibility now, not mine to manage or monitor. The next morning, we set out on a day trip to the Douro Valley, the birthplace of port wine. The landscape took our breath away, terraced vineyards carved into steep hillsides, the river snaking through the valley like a blue ribbon, quintas, wine estates, dotting the countryside with their whitewashed walls and terracotta roofs. Our tour guide, Manuel, was a poet-turned-wine expert who spoke about the valley with reverence. This landscape, he told us as our small group, stood at a viewpoint overlooking miles of terraced vineyards, was built entirely by human hands. For centuries, people have moved stones, sculpted the earth, coaxed vines to grow in impossible places. It is an act of both humility and audacity, working with nature while also reshaping it. As we visited 3 different quintas, tasting their distinctive wines and learning about their particular approaches to viticulture, I found myself drawing parallels to my own life. Like these winemakers, I had spent years cultivating something valuable, my relationship with Margot, my role in our family, with patience and care. But unlike them, I had failed to recognize when the balance had shifted, when too much had been taken and not enough given back. The best winemakers, Manuel explained over lunch at a vineyard estate, know when to intervene and when to step back. Too much control, and you stifle the natural expression of the grape. Too little, and you risk losing everything to disease or bad weather. Thomas caught my eye across the table, knowing I was absorbing these words on multiple levels. He raised his glass subtly, a private toast to the wisdom I was gathering, not just about wine, but about life and relationships. That evening, back at our Porto hotel, I wrote in the leather-bound journal Thomas had given me as a wedding gift. It was becoming a record not just of our honeymoon adventures, but of my evolving thoughts about family, boundaries, and self-worth. Perhaps the art of living well, I wrote, is not so different from the art of making wine. It requires knowing when to work hard and when to let things unfold naturally. When to protect what matters and when to cut away what doesn't serve you. When to be patient and when decisive action is needed. Most of all, it requires recognizing that transformation is constant, inevitable, and potentially beautiful if we have the courage to guide it with wisdom rather than fear. The remaining days of our honeymoon passed in a blend of exploration and relaxation. We drove along the coast, staying in small fishing villages where the catch of the day became our dinner. We hiked to remote beaches accessible only by foot, marveling at the dramatic cliffs and crystal-clear waters. We spent a day in a tiny medieval town where an elderly woman invited us into her home to show us how she made traditional Portuguese lace, her gnarled fingers working with impossible precision and speed. Throughout it all, I felt myself settling more deeply into this new version of Alina, a woman who could receive generosity without feeling obligated, who could state her needs without apology, who recognized her own worth independent of others. Validation, It wasn't that I had become someone different. Rather, I had finally given myself permission to be who I had always been beneath the accommodating exterior. On our final night in Portugal, we returned to Lisbon and splurged on dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant overlooking the city. Dressed in the one formal outfit I'd packed, a midnight blue dress that matched my sapphire earrings, I felt a confidence that went beyond appearance. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had faced a pivotal challenge and emerged stronger, clearer about her own boundaries and values. "What are you thinking?" Thomas asked as we lingered over dessert, the lights of the city twinkling below us like earthbound stars. "I'm thinking about how different this honeymoon was from what we planned," I said, "and how perfect it was anyway. Not despite the change, but because of what the change represented." He reached across the table for my hand, which was a reclaiming of power, I said simply. A declaration that my happiness matters, that actions have consequences, that love doesn't mean endlessly accommodating bad behavior. Thomas smiled, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. "I've always known who you are, Alida. Strong, compassionate, principled, but I think maybe you're finally seeing it too." The flight home felt like crossing the threshold, not just from vacation back to everyday life, but from one chapter to another. As the plane descended toward familiar territory, I thought about what awaited us, returning to work, setting up our new apartment together, navigating family dynamics with my newly established boundaries. Margot had texted once more during our trip, sharing that Naomi had been offered the Berlin position and had accepted it. "She deserved it," Margot had written. "I'm learning to be happy for other people's success without feeling diminished by it." It was a small thing, perhaps, but significant, an acknowledgement of the very pattern that had driven her to sabotage my honeymoon, and a stated commitment to changing it. I didn't know if she could sustain this growth, if the deeper patterns of our relationship could truly be transformed. But for the first time, I wasn't making her change my responsibility. Her journey was her own, just as mine was mine. Our apartment welcomed us with the staleness of 2 weeks' absence, mail piled on the counter, plants slightly wilted despite the automatic watering system, a fine layer of dust on surfaces. But it also held promise, wedding gifts still. In their boxes, blank walls waiting for the photos from our honeymoon, empty spaces we would fill together over the years to come. As we unpacked, sorting laundry and arranging souvenirs, I came across the jewelry box containing the sapphire earrings from Margot. I had worn them almost every day in Portugal, partly because they were beautiful and matched most of my outfits, but also as a daily reminder of my new boundaries. Taking them out now, I placed them in my jewelry box alongside other meaningful pieces. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the delicate gold bracelet Thomas had given me on our first anniversary of dating, the watch my father had left me in his will. "Will you see Margot this week?" Thomas asked, noticing what I was doing. "Yes," I said after a moment's consideration. "I think it's time. Not to return to how things were, but to start establishing what things will be going forward." 3 days later, I met Margot for coffee at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our respective workplaces. She arrived first. I could tell from her too casual posture and the empty cup already in front of her. Always early when nervous, she stood when she saw me, a tentative smile on her face. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down across from her. "How was Portugal?" "Beautiful," I replied, setting down my bag. "Different from what we'd planned, but exactly what we needed." She nodded, accepting both the literal meaning and the subtext. "I've been thinking about you a lot while you were gone." "About us, really." I ordered a cappuccino from the server, who approached, then gave Margot my full attention. "And what have you been thinking?" She took a deep breath. "That I've been competing with you our entire lives, but you never even knew we were racing. That I resented your goodness because it made my own shortcomings more obvious. That I took advantage of your forgiveness because it was easier than changing. Her honesty surprised me, not just the content, but the directness. The old Margot would have couched these admissions in justifications or subtle blame. I've thought a lot about us too, I said as my coffee arrived. About how I enabled patterns that hurt both of us. How I confused sacrifice with love. How I let fear of conflict keep me from setting necessary boundaries. Margot nodded slowly. So where do we go from here? It was the question I'd been contemplating throughout my honeymoon, during quiet moments watching the Portuguese sunset or walking along ancient cobblestone streets. I think we start by accepting that our relationship needs to change fundamentally, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. Not just small adjustments or temporary fixes after conflicts, but a complete reassessment of how we interact. What does that look like? She asked, a hint of apprehension in her voice. It means I stop being your safety net, I said. No more financial bailouts, no more cleaning up professional messes, no more absorbing emotional outbursts without consequence. It means you take full responsibility for your choices and actions. It means real honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. She winced slightly but nodded. And in return? In return, we have a chance at building a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than dependence and resentment. A relationship where we can genuinely celebrate each other's successes and support each other through failures, without the undercurrent of competition or obligation. Margot was quiet for a moment, stirring her fresh coffee without drinking it. I'd like that, she finally said. But I'm not sure I know how to do it. This pattern between us, it's so old, I don't remember anything different. I understood her uncertainty. These dynamics had defined us since childhood, me as the supporter, her as the supported. Me as the forgiver, her as the forgiven. Changing such deeply ingrained patterns wouldn't happen overnight or through simple declarations of intent. We'll figure it out day by day, I said, with clear communication and firm boundaries, and probably with setbacks and mistakes along the way. She looked up at me, a flicker of the old Margot in her eyes, the sister I'd loved despite everything. The girl who had once held my hand on the first day of school and promised everything would be okay. I'm seeing a therapist, she said, twice a week. It's helping me understand why I do the things I do. Why I felt so threatened by your happiness that I tried to sabotage it. That's good, I said sincerely. I'm proud of you for taking that step. And Naomi got the Berlin position, she added. I wrote to the committee explaining that her research formed the foundation of the proposal. She's flying out next month to begin setting up the project. I nodded, acknowledging this act of restitution. How did that feel? Being honest about her contributions? Margot considered the question seriously. Terrifying at first. I was sure it would end my career. But after I did it, there was this lightness. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to put it down. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we'd never explored before. How our parents' preferential treatment had shaped both of us, how my enablement had stunted her growth, how her resentment had manifested in 100 small cruelties over the years. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was real in a way our interactions had rarely been. As we prepared to leave, Margot hesitated. There's one more thing I should tell you. I've withdrawn from consideration for the Sydney project as well, the one you didn't know about yet. I realized I was pursuing these international positions for the wrong reasons, not because I was passionate about the work, but because I wanted the validation, the prestige. I'm staying here, focusing on doing meaningful work rather than impressive work. This admission, freely given without my prompting, felt like the first green shoot after a forest fire, a small but significant sign of new growth in scorched earth. That sounds like a healthy choice, I said. For what it's worth, I think you're capable of extraordinary things when you're motivated by genuine passion rather than competition. Her smile was tentative but real. "Thanks, that means a lot. Especially from you." We parted with a brief hug, not the prolonged embrace of complete reconciliation, but not the cold formality of strangers either. Something in between, cautious but hopeful. As I walked back to my office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because all was forgiven, or because I believed Margot had been magically transformed by our confrontation, but because I had finally stepped into my own power, establishing boundaries that protected my well-being while still leaving room for growth and healing in our relationship. The sun broke through the clouds as I reached my building, casting everything in clear, revealing light. I paused for a moment, turning my face upward to feel its warmth. In Portugal, a wise vineyard owner had told us that the best grapes grow not in perfect conditions, but in soil that forces them to struggle a little, to send their roots deeper, to draw strength from adversity. Perhaps relationships were the same way. Perhaps the difficult truth was better than the comfortable lie, the honest confrontation more valuable than the peaceful facade. Perhaps Margot and I would build something stronger from these broken pieces than we ever could have. From maintaining our dysfunctional status quo. I couldn't know for certain what the future held for us, but I knew who I was now, a woman who valued herself enough to demand respect, who recognized that love without boundaries wasn't love at all but codependence, who understood that sometimes the greatest act of compassion was holding others accountable for their actions. And that knowledge, that clarity, was worth every difficult moment of the journey that had brought me here. 6 months after my wedding, I stood in our apartment kitchen arranging canapes on a serving platter while Thomas uncorked wine bottles and arranged glasses in neat rows. The autumn light filtered through our windows, casting a golden glow over the space we'd carefully created together. Walls adorned with framed photos from Portugal, shelves holding treasures from weekend antiquing trips, the comfortable lived-in feeling of a home rather than just a place to sleep. "Nervous?" Thomas asked, sliding his arms around my waist from behind and resting his chin on my shoulder. I considered the question while arranging the last of the stuffed mushrooms. "Not nervous exactly, cautiously optimistic." Tonight would be the first time we'd hosted both families together since the wedding. My mother, my Aunt Claire, my cousin Rebecca, and Margot. Thomas's parents, his brother James, and sister-in-law Vanessa. A deliberate gathering to celebrate our 6-month anniversary and our recent news. I was 8 weeks pregnant. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Thomas's family was always punctual, a trait I'd come to appreciate over the years of knowing them. His mother, Catherine, bustled in with a bouquet of autumn flowers and a homemade apple pie, while his father, Robert, followed with a case of Thomas's favorite craft beer. James and Vanessa arrived with their 3-year-old daughter Lily, who immediately demanded to be shown the room where Uncle Thomas keeps his camera stuff. The apartment filled with their warm energy, Catherine insisting on helping in the kitchen despite my protests, Robert examining our new bookshelves with approving nods, Lily's peals of laughter as Thomas showed her how the aperture of a camera lens opened and closed like a blinking eye. "Your sister confirmed she's coming, right?" Catherine asked as she rearranged my carefully placed canapes into a more artistic pattern. She'd never directly commented on the tension between Margot and me at the wedding, but I knew she was observant enough to have noticed. "Yes, she texted earlier. She's bringing someone, a colleague from work." Catherine raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Instead, she squeezed my shoulder gently. "I'm glad. Family should be together for celebrations." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find my mother, elegant as always in a cashmere sweater and pearls, Aunt Claire with her trademark oversized art jewelry, and cousin Rebecca, who immediately enveloped me in a lavender-scented hug. "Where's my favorite niece?" Claire called out, though I was her only niece. It was our long-standing joke. "Helping Thomas entertain Lily," my mother explained, handing me a gift bag. "Claire, Come help me with these appetizers. Catherine's. Probably rearranged them all by now. As my mother and aunt headed toward the kitchen, their friendly rivalry with Catherine over hospitality skills, a constant source of amusement, Rebecca lingered in the entryway with me. "Margot's downstairs," she said quietly, "parking. She seems different." Rebecca had always been perceptive, the family member most attuned to undercurrents and unspoken tensions. She'd been the first to notice when things started going sideways with Margot years ago, gently warning me that my sister's jealousy was intensifying in ways I hadn't recognized. "Different good or different concerning?" I asked, arranging wine glasses on the sideboard. "Different better, I think. More grounded, less performative." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Actually, she reminds me of you." Before I could ask what she meant, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Margot standing beside a tall man with kind eyes and a professor's slouch. "Elena," she said, her smile tentative but genuine. "This is David. He works in the research department at the foundation." David extended his hand. "I've heard so much about you. All good things, I promise." I welcomed them in, accepting the bottle of wine Margot offered. It was a Portuguese Vinho Verde, a thoughtful choice that acknowledged our honeymoon without directly referencing all that had led to it. A silent acknowledgement of our shared history without dwelling on the painful parts. The evening progressed more smoothly than I dared hope. Our families blended well, finding common ground in debates about movies and books, sharing stories about Thomas and me that had us alternately laughing and cringing. David turned out to be a perfect addition. Intelligent without being pretentious. Funny in a quiet way that balanced Margot's more intense energy. I noticed how he gently redirected conversations when they veered toward potentially competitive territories, his hand occasionally resting on Margot's arm as if grounding her. After dinner, as everyone migrated to the living room with dessert plates and coffee cups, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Margot for the first time that evening. She was rinsing plates before loading them into the dishwasher, a simple gesture of helpfulness that the old Margot would have considered beneath her. "David seems wonderful," I said, picking up a dish towel to dry the serving platters. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "He is. We've been dating for 3 months. He's patient, doesn't put up with my drama, but doesn't judge me for it either." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The right partner sees your flaws clearly, but loves you through the process of addressing them, not enabling, not condemning, just accompanying. "The foundation work seems to be going well," I ventured. After our coffee shop conversation 6 months ago, Margot had made a significant career shift, leaving her high-pressure corporate consulting role for a position with a nonprofit focused on educational access for underprivileged youth. The salary was lower, the prestige factor diminished, but the meaning quotient exponentially higher. "It's the best decision I've ever made," she said, her voice quiet but certain. "For the first time, I feel like my work matters beyond my resume or bank account. These kids, they're so brilliant, Elena. They just need someone to remove the barriers." She paused, her hands stilling in the soapy water. "Like you did for me all those years. Except I'm trying to be worthy of the support, not take advantage of it." The comparison caught me off guard, not because it wasn't apt, but because it revealed a level of self-awareness I hadn't expected. The Margot of a year ago would never have drawn this parallel, never have acknowledged how she'd misused my support. "I'm proud of you," I said simply, meaning it. "Not because you're doing what I would do, but because you're doing what fulfills you authentically." She dried her hands on a kitchen towel, turning to face me fully. "There's something else I want to tell you. I've been waiting for the right moment." My heart skipped nervously, old patterns of anticipating Margot's announcements rising to the surface. "I've been in therapy for almost 7 months now," she continued. "Not just the twice-weekly sessions I mentioned before, but intensive work. with someone who specializes in childhood trauma and family systems. I nodded encouragingly, unsure where this was leading. Last month, we started working specifically on making amends, not just apologizing, but trying to repair the damage I've caused. I've been making a list of all the ways I've hurt people. Especially you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This is for you. It's not a grand gesture, and it doesn't erase anything, but it's a start. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a receipt for a wire transfer to my account, the exact amount Thomas and I had lost in non-refundable deposits when our original honeymoon was canceled, plus the difference in cost between those luxury accommodations and the more modest ones we'd booked last minute in Portugal. I know money doesn't fix what I did, Margot said quickly. And I know you and Thomas are doing well financially. But this isn't about the money. It's about acknowledging the concrete harm I caused and taking responsibility for it. I looked at the receipt, then back at my sister. There was no expectation in her eyes, no demand for gratitude or immediate forgiveness. Just a quiet accountability that felt revolutionary in our shared history. Thank you, I said, folding the receipt and returning it to the envelope. Not just for this, but for doing the work. For trying to change patterns that hurt us both. She nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Facing myself honestly, seeing the person I became. There are days I can barely look in the mirror. But then I remember what my therapist says, that remorse without change is just self-indulgence. From the living room, laughter erupted. Lily must have done something amusing, judging by the tone of the collective response. The sound grounded me in the present moment, in the reality of this gathering of people who mattered to us, in the small miracle of Margot and me standing in my kitchen, having the most honest conversation of our adult lives. We should join them, I said, gesturing toward the living room. Thomas and I have news to share. A flicker of something crossed Margot's face, not the old jealousy or competitiveness, but a momentary vulnerability quickly controlled. Good news, I hope. The best, I confirmed. But it's for everyone to hear together. Back in the living room, Thomas caught my eye questioningly. I nodded, and he stood, reaching for my hand to draw me beside him. We have an announcement, he said, his voice warm with barely contained joy. Elena and I are expecting a baby in early May. The room erupted in exclamations and congratulations. Thomas's mother burst into happy tears, while my mother immediately began talking about nursery colors. James made a joke about Lily getting a cousin to boss around, while Vanessa offered practical advice about morning sickness remedies. Amid the excited chaos, I found myself watching Margot. In the past, news like this would have triggered her competitive instincts. She would have found a way to redirect attention, to diminish our moment, to position herself as somehow relevant to the narrative. But now she simply smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes and mouthed congratulations across the room. Later, as guests prepared to leave, Margot approached with David at her side. I'm really happy for you both, she said, her voice steady. You're going to be amazing parents. Thank you, Thomas said, his arm around my waist. We're excited and terrified in equal measure, David laughed. The perfect combination for new parents from what I hear. Margot hesitated, then added, I hope I can be a good aunt. The kind that brings inappropriate gifts and takes them for ice cream before dinner, but also the kind they can trust. The vulnerability in her voice touched me deeply. She wasn't asking for a role she hadn't earned. She was expressing a hope to be worthy of one. I'd like that, I said softly. One day at a time, right? She nodded, understanding all that remained unsaid between us. The trust that needed rebuilding, the boundaries that would remain firm, the new relationship we were cautiously cultivating from the ashes of the old one. After everyone had left and Thomas and I were cleaning up the last glasses, he pulled me into a gentle embrace. That went well, he murmured against my hair. Especially with Margot. It did, I agreed, resting my head against his chest. She's really trying. And so are you, he pointed out. It takes courage to leave space for someone to change after they've hurt you. Not everyone can do that. I thought about his words as we finished cleaning up and prepared for bed. It had indeed taken courage, not the flashy kind that makes for dramatic stories, but the quieter variety that allows for vulnerability while maintaining healthy boundaries. The kind that recognizes people's capacity for growth without naively ignoring their history of harm. The next morning, I woke early, a habit I'd developed since learning about the pregnancy. These quiet dawn hours had become precious to me. Time to reflect, to write in my journal, to connect with the tiny life growing inside me before the demands of the day began. Sitting by the window with a cup of herbal tea, I wrote about the previous evening, about the subtle but significant shifts in my relationship with Margot, about the family we were creating and the one I'd been born into. As I wrote, I realized something profound. The boundaries I'd established with Margot hadn't just protected me from further harm. They had created space for both of us to grow into better versions of ourselves. By refusing to continue our dysfunctional patterns, I had freed myself from the role of enabler and Margot from the role of taker. By demanding accountability, I had offered her the chance to develop integrity. By stepping back, I had given her room to step up. My phone buzzed with a text from Margot. "Thank you for including me last night. It meant more than you know." Lunch. Next week, my treat. No agenda except catching up. I smiled at the simplicity of the invitation. No manipulation. No implied obligation. Just a straightforward suggestion between equals. "That sounds lovely," I replied. Tuesday works for me. Setting down my phone, I rested my hand on my still flat stomach, thinking about the child who would enter our family in a few months. This baby would never know the old dynamics between Margot and me, would never witness the enabling and resentment that had characterized so much of our relationship. Instead, they would know their mother as someone who valued herself enough to set boundaries, and their aunt as someone who had done the difficult work of confronting her own demons. That thought filled me with a deep, quiet joy. Breaking destructive family patterns wasn't just about healing the past. It was about creating a healthier future for the next generation. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Thomas peeked in, his hair rumpled from sleep. "You okay out here?" "It's early." "I'm perfect," I said, reaching for his hand. "Just thinking about the baby. About the kind of family we're building." He sat beside me, his thumb gently caressing my knuckles. "A family with clear boundaries and genuine love," he said. "One where people are held accountable but also given grace to grow." "Exactly," I agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "A family where everyone's worth isn't measured by what they do for others, but by who they are authentically." In the growing light of morning, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey with Margot wasn't over. Real change takes time, setbacks are inevitable, and trust once broken must be rebuilt brick by brick. But we had taken the first crucial steps away from toxic patterns and toward something healthier, something honest, something that honored both our individual worth and our shared history. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Margot at a small cafe near my office, watching as she described a breakthrough with a particularly challenging student at the foundation. Her face was animated, her gestures expressive, her passion for the work evident in every word. This wasn't the carefully curated performance of the old Margot, designed to impress or compete. It was the genuine enthusiasm of someone who had found meaningful work aligned with her values. "Enough about me," she said, setting down her fork after finishing her salad. "How are you feeling? Any morning sickness?" "Some," I admitted. "Mostly in the afternoons, oddly enough. But the doctor says everything looks perfect so far." She smiled, reaching into her bag. "I got something small for the baby. It's way too early, I know, but I couldn't resist. She handed me a tissue-wrapped package. Inside was a tiny stuffed fox, its russet fur soft against my fingers. It reminded me of that story Mom used to read us, Margot explained. The one about the fox family where the siblings protected each other. You used to make her read it every night for months. I was touched that she remembered, not just the story itself, but what it had meant to me as a child. Thank you. It's perfect. I've been thinking a lot about the stories we tell ourselves, she said, her expression thoughtful. About how I constructed this narrative where I was always competing with you, where your success somehow diminished me. My therapist calls it a scarcity mindset, the belief that there isn't enough love or recognition or success to go around. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. And when you believe that, you're constantly trying to secure your share, even if it means taking from others. Exactly, but I'm learning there's another way to see things. That your happiness doesn't diminish mine. That your success doesn't threaten me. That there's enough love and recognition for both of us, just in different forms. This insight, so simple yet so profound, moved me deeply. It represented exactly the shift that had been missing in our relationship for decades. I'm proud of you, I said sincerely. Not in a condescending way, but genuinely impressed by the work you're doing, not just professionally, but personally. She accepted the compliment with a slight nod, neither deflecting it with false modesty nor using it to fish for more. Validation, another small but significant change. As we walked back toward our respective offices, Margot hesitated at the corner where we would part ways. There's a family therapy session next month, she said. My therapist thinks it might be helpful for us to attend together, you, me, and Mom, to talk about some of the patterns that shaped us both. No pressure, and it's completely fine if you're not comfortable with it. The old Elena would have immediately agreed, prioritizing Margot's healing journey over her own boundaries. But the woman I had become took a moment to consider what was right for me, for my growing family, for my own emotional health. Let me think about it, I said honestly. I appreciate the invitation, and I understand the value of that kind of work. But I need to make sure I'm in the right place for it emotionally, especially with the pregnancy. Margot nodded, no hint of disappointment or manipulation in her expression. Of course, just let me know when you've decided either way. We parted with a brief hug, and as I walked back to my office, I marveled at how different this interaction had been from our patterns of the past. No guilt, no obligation, no subtle power plays, just two adult women navigating a complex relationship with mutual respect and clear boundaries. That evening, as Thomas and I sat on our balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I told him about Margot's invitation to family therapy. What do you think? He asked, careful not to influence my decision. I considered the question seriously, watching a flock of birds wheel against the darkening sky. I think it could be valuable eventually. But not right now, not during first trimester when I'm already feeling emotionally vulnerable. I need to protect my peace during this time. He nodded, squeezing my hand. That sounds like a healthy boundary. The amazing thing is, I continued, Margot accepted that boundary without question. No guilt trip, no manipulation, no making it about her disappointment. Just respect for my decision-making process. That's significant progress, Thomas observed. For both of you. He was right, I realized. Margot's growth was evident in her ability to respect my boundaries, but my own growth was equally apparent in my ability to establish them without guilt or apology. We were both evolving, finding our way toward a healthier relationship, not by ignoring the past, but by learning from it. Later that night, I sent Margot a text. I've thought about the family therapy invitation. I'm not ready for that step yet. Need to focus on staying centered during first trimester. But I appreciate the invitation, and I am open to considering it later in the year. Her response came quickly, completely understand. Your well-being comes first, especially now. The invitation remains open whenever, if ever you feel it would be beneficial. No pressure at all. I showed the exchange to Thomas, who smiled. Now that, he said, is what healthy communication looks like. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and paused, studying the woman looking back at me. I saw someone who had learned that standing up for herself wasn't selfish, but necessary. That boundaries weren't walls, but vital definitions of self. That true strength lay not in endless giving, but in knowing when to say, enough. I placed my hand gently on my stomach, thinking about the legacy I wanted to pass on to this child. Not just material possessions or opportunities, but the emotional inheritance of self-worth and healthy boundaries. By standing firm when Margot canceled our honeymoon, by taking the difficult step of canceling her visa applications in return, I had not only reclaimed my own power, but also helped set in motion changes that might eventually heal our family's broken patterns. Your mother has learned some valuable lessons, I whispered to the tiny life growing within me. And I promise to share them with you, that your worth is inherent, not earned through sacrifice. That love without respect isn't really love at all. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is hold them accountable. And that it's never too late to break destructive patterns and build something healthier in their place. Outside, the night had deepened to indigo stars, emerging one by one in the vastness above our city. I thought about how far Margot and I had come in less than a year, from the devastating discovery of her betrayal to this cautious rebuilding of trust on new, more solid foundations. The journey hadn't been linear or perfect, and we still had a long way to go. But we had taken the crucial first steps away from toxic patterns and toward authentic connection. And in that progress, however imperfect and ongoing, I found a deep, quiet hope, not just for our relationship, but for the generations that would follow. Some lessons are worth the pain of learning them, especially when they break chains that have bound a family for too long. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.